Welcome back to the Sage Dragon Book Show. I'm your host, Shaquana. Hope you are all having a beautiful Saturday. It's the last day of January. So much has been going on in the world. And, where do I start? I really do feel passionate about keeping the protesters in mind. I also didn't participate. I did the ice out protest yesterday because of what is going on in Minnesota and really all over our country. My name is Shaquana. If any of you are new to my show, I discuss books. So I read all sorts of books from different categories, and I like to just bring them here to encourage people to read more, have other hobbies besides screens. So if you know people that like books, like to read, maybe interested in learning more about good books out, give me a like. I have a YouTube page, Sage Dragon Book Show, so you can find me there. And I have a lot of different episodes that you can check out. So today, so back in the fall, my daughter Deja, she challenged me to do this 75 hard challenge, and this is it's they call it a mental challenge that builds discipline and it helps you. Some people use it as a catalyst for weight loss. I'll get more into what it is, but as a part of it, today's episode, I'll be discussing all the books that I read, the nonfiction books that I read as part of the challenge. So that's so I started it November 10th last year, and I just finished it last Friday. Yay! So I'm really glad that I'm done with this challenge. Can you tell? So for any of you who may not be familiar with it, it's all over social media. I'm not on TikTok, but I know that it's very popular on TikTok. But I have the rules up here, and it's the other thing is there's 75 hard and there's 75 soft. 75 soft is a newer version of it that I guess is more of a it's a more flexible way of doing it, because 75 hard is the rules are for 75 days you are to follow a meal plan of your choice. So keto, paleo, it's a lot of Weight Watchers, but you can't cheat. You're supposed to drink a gallon of water a day, read 10 pages of a nonfiction book, not audio. And you're supposed to do two 45-minute physical activity, and one of them has to be outdoors. The other thing about it is if you miss a day, you got to start from scratch. So it has a high failure rate because that is very hard to do. And they say the founder, I've heard him say that's the point. So some people feel like it's better to have some flexibility with it. So I ended up with a hybrid version because originally I was like, well, if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do hard. But I also feel like it's not the way life works. If 75 days goes by and you eat a slice of cake, is that considered cheating? And then you're supposed to start from scratch? And that's not the way things go. However, I did want to build discipline and strengthen my grit and all of that. So I was proud that I was able to accomplish it. I didn't touch alcohol. And I mean, I was doing this through the whole like holiday season. So even on New Year's, I was sipping my apple cider and Christmas, the holidays, going to events. I remember my friend, she had a baby shower and they were giving out Moscata, and I'm telling her about this. So I really was able to build that discipline of just not, abstaining. I also was very committed to the exercising, even outdoors in the inclement weather. So it was a challenge. I'm resting now because it's been a long road and with it. But I think all in all, I wouldn't do this again personally, because I feel like especially at my age, it's about finding the things that you really need for yourself and customizing it. Um, you know, some people, this could be a great catalyst for losing weight. I didn't lose any weight on it because I think a lot of the stuff that the habits that would cause the weight loss were already things that I was doing, and I don't have as much to lose. So that's what I mean by finding the things that work for you. But I can see how some people could benefit from it. A lot of people have really benefit from doing it. So no, I'll say if you do it, let me know. Anybody out there have done it? I know a lot of times this time of year is the time of year that a lot of people like to do resolutions and things. There's a huge movement now where people are abstaining from alcohol. They want to either quit altogether or drink less, which the 75 soft, with that, you can drink during social occasions. You only need to exercise once a day, drink 3 liters of water daily, read 10 pages of any book. And if you miss a day, you just keep going. So I think that is a more realistic way to build sustainable habits than just going all or nothing, because it's just too rigid of a life. We're living in very right now. There's all types of storms and inclement weather going on, and you may not be able to go outside. There were days where I was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to move? Because I walk every day, even in the rain, sleet, snow, and I live near the Canada. But there was days where I'm like, I'm slipping and sliding. I'm outside trying to get a workout in. So it does help you build that creative mindset of how am I going to commit to something. But I just don't think we should be punishing ourselves, if that makes any sense. So that's 75 soft, 75 hard. You can Google it and learn more about it if it's something that you think you want to do to help, like, build some new habits. All right, so let's get into the books I read. The other reason why I wanted to do this episode is I noticed that a lot of the people that do 75 hard, I see a lot of the same books. And it's similar to what you see in the Instagram, book talk space, where people are talking about the same stuff. Um, it's so many great books out there. So I don't think any of these books have been featured, especially as part of a 75 challenge. So that was another reason why I wanted to have this episode. All right. So first up is I also before I get to my first book, these are the themes. Can we show that slide? Right. So the themes of the books that I read as part of the challenge, so vast. Um, Health and wellness. I got to read about history, certain periods of time of history, the Reconstruction era through 1930s. I got to um, learn about the Harlem Renaissance more. I've been learning a lot about Harlem. And then New Orleans, I've been learning a lot and reading a lot about New Orleans history and culture. I got to read about ecology and nutrition and mental health and personal development. So some awesome books. And we'll also have links as to where you can purchase these books or you can get them from the library. All right. So first up, my first book is called The Joy Goddess. Aaliyah Walker and the Harlem Renaissance by Aaliyah Bundles, who's the author of On Her Own Ground. And she was dubbed the Joy Goddess of Harlem's 1920s by poet Langston Hughes. So, and I remember seeing in the book, there's this part where he scribbled that out. He could coin some phrases. And then a lot of the times when he coined a phrase, like Black Wall Street, it sticks. So he coined the phrase Joy Goddess. Aaliyah's Walker is the daughter. She's the only child of Madam C.J. Walker. And her great granddaughter wrote this book, Aaliyah Bundles. I have a video to show of her. And Aaliyah Bundles, I hope I'm saying her name correctly. She is a journalist and a historian, and she's been writing books for years. So she did write several books on Madam C.J. Walker's life. She wrote a book On Her Own Ground that was optioned into a Netflix movie about her life. That movie has been somewhat controversial as far as like some of the way it was depicted, but it was loosely based on her book. So she's been writing for years. And I was like, wow, beautiful cover. I saw another Bookstagrammer post about it. I saw it on different pages, and I was like, I want to read this. The title, like, I was just like, it was getting cold, and I was looking for joy and light as much as I could. So I wanted to learn more about this Black woman who was living the soft life as much as a Black woman could live the soft life in America in the 1920s. She was living it. She's an heiress. She's like like a modern day Lori Harvey, just being able to be her because she has inherited so much fortune, but it doesn't come without its pains. She went through a lot in her life. It was very interesting learning about her life. The other great thing that I liked about it is I hadn't read any books about Madam C.J. Walker, so I learned about both of them because their lives were so intertwined that this book gave me a bigger understanding of her life as well. So I was like, oh, good. I feel more knowledgeable, as well as the people that were around her. Because there was another woman, and her name escapes me now, even though I went down a whole rabbit hole and looked her up. And there was a write-up about her in the Smithsonian African American Museum in DC about this other woman who had just about the same amount of success in beauty as Madam C.J. Walker, but hasn't been talked about as much. So you were getting that history too, because oftentimes in history in general, especially also, Black and Indigenous history, you'll hear the one story about the one person, and there's all types of people that have lived interesting lives, contributed to movements that we just never hear of. And Aaliyah's part of why she wanted to write this book is she felt like her great grandmother, Aaliyah, deserved her own story because, for example, it was Aaliyah's foresight that encouraged her mother, Madam C.J. Walker, to move to Harlem. when they had their businesses in the Midwest, she just loved going to New York City, Harlem. And it was a good call because when they arrived in like the late 19, like 1915, 1913, don't quote me on the year, but it was before the 1920s when Harlem Renaissance era and, the roaring 20s. She, they developed this, they were able to really capitalize on that. So that was Aaliyah. Now, Aaliyah was more into art and culture and beauty than her mom. Like her mother was a businesswoman. She also was very concerned with the state of the black person, Negro at the time. So she did a lot of civic work. At a certain point, she wanted the business to be more than just about beauty. And I was just blown away looking at all the, they were building colleges back then, and they had beauty schools in multiple states. They were traveling throughout the United States on the West Coast, in the South, in the Midwest. They went into the Caribbean, they went into Europe. So it's like not to say that they weren't dealing with serious barriers and discrimination and all the Jim Crow barriers. It's just that they were also they were pioneering. But one of the things that was became really clearer to me reading this story is how powerful the black on black dollar was, because I don't think they would have been able to do something like that now because our dollar is so diluted. They were only buying from each other. So if you're charging 25 cents for a hair pomade and everybody, it wasn't just about the rich. All these women who wanted to look good, even if they were maids and domestics, they still wanted to have their hair groomed because grooming and respectability were all very strong back then. They would pay for the pomades. And that's how um, Madam C.J. Walker was able to get her fortune. So it's kind of different now because now sometimes people just want certain classes of people, buying from them. They sold to everyone. So anyway, Aaliyah, she lived in Harlem. She had a vision of creating this space. So she purchased this building called the Dark Tower, and she was able to have it be, her vision was that it would be a place that the artists, the writers of her time, the Paul Robesons and the W.E.B. Du Bois, different people could gather and write and have different um, have like a positive experience. So she went all out and had an architect just have this place be really, really beautiful and have the decorations be extraordinary. Everything was really grand, and that's the way that she did things. And so that place lasted about, was it 10 years? And then it ended up becoming a health clinic. And now it's part of the New York Public Library system. I looked that up because I was like, what happened to that building? So it is still around, but they had to close it because her heart was in the right place and the vision, but it didn't end up being a good financial situation. And that was one of the things that Aaliyah struggled with. She didn't have the same business acumen that her mother had. It was also the times were starting to change. Like by the time had inherited the business, the Great Depression had started, and that had a huge impact on everybody's life and that business, and it was part of the downfall of it. But she splashed it up in Harlem, and she it get the book also got into, she dealt with a lot of um, love loss, poor marriages and things like that. She also had some self image issues. So it was kind of hard hearing some of this or reading some of it, but it just goes to show you that no one has a perfect life. And she definitely didn't have a perfect life. She did her best, and she ended up dying young too. She died at 46. Her mother died at 51. So they didn't live long lives, and they both were dealing with hypertension. So I was like, wow, just thinking about the stuff that is still taking us out and causing issues. So I know I'm going on and on about that. Let's see. But yes, I got a lot out of this book. I got the history of two successful women in American business, Madam C.J. Walker and her daughter. You got the dynamics of combining love and marriage and finances, because in both of her marriages, there were, especially the first one, there were a lot of problems with the way that that was mixed. You got the joys and challenges of inheriting a company, and running a successful business as a Black woman during the Reconstruction, Jim Crow era. And you got a story about finding one's strength and contributing to the world. Like her thing was her thing. Like she had a very good eye for art, culture, bringing different people together. And it was tough because the business that she inherited didn't perfectly fit her strengths and abilities, but she wasn't going to give up on it. So it wasn't that she just was, I'm not saying that she did a terrible job. It's just that that was her mother's vision. Her mother was savvy and had relationships and a different kind of passion for it. By the time she came along and things was changing a little bit, and her interest was more on the social side, she was having a hard time fitting that with the expectations of how things used to be done. And that's part of the push and pull that she dealt with. But I would say it's a good story. I have a clip I'd like to show of her, the author, speaking a little bit about it.
Walker was the first really major comprehensive biography of Madam C.J. Walker, who people know as the entrepreneur and philanthropist. But writing about Alelia Walker, her daughter, and my namesake was a very different experience. But in fact, when I was younger, I was actually more interested in Alelia Walker's story because she knew the writers of the Harlem Renaissance when I was in high school in the late 60s and early 70s, and I was discovering Black literature. I was drawn to her because she knew Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston and Countee Cullen. So I've come full circle writing about both women.
Yes, and of course you're named after her, which we'll talk about that a little bit as we get into the conversation. So that's something like, who is this lady that I'm named after?
Right, exactly.
So that's pretty powerful. And I mean, there's so many places that we could start, but I just love the fact that, as you said, that there is this family, there's this lineage, there is, the history that surrounds both women's lives. And, what an honor it is really for you to even be able to tell that story or their stories, because how many of us really don't even know, what happened with our, historical figures or our matriarchs or patriarchs.
Yeah, and part of what I really love doing is encouraging other people to learn their family stories, because while these two women are famous,
Right.
there are other people in my family whose stories are very interesting to me, and I'm diving more deeply into those stories. But yes, they are sort of the obvious ones because they're famous, they're written about, other people knew who they were. But everybody's family has these heroines who made a way out of no way. And part of what I try to do in telling Madam Walker's story and Alelia Walker's story is to reframe American history so
Yes.
that we can see all of the women in our families. Madam Walker is Civil War, Reconstruction, World War I. Alelia Walker is Reconstruction, World War I, Harlem Renaissance, the Great Depression. And our stories as Black women generally have not been centered. More and more of us are writing about them. They are now, but certainly when I was growing up, they were not in my history books.
Yeah, so I that conversation is from the Brown Girl Collective Book Club, and it's the episode with Aaliyah Bundles. And you can find it on YouTube. But I purposely zeroed in on that part of the clip because I wanted to pose the question: how far back can you trace your family history? So, any people out there, producer?
They're coming in, but I can begin the conversation with you. Um, my grandfather is New York, Florida, New York through New York, Florida, Louisiana,
Mm-hmm.
and then, as I've told you a bunch of times, and my grandmother is New York, Florida, Trinidad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's something that I have Tina Knowles' matriarch book, which I'd like to discuss at some point. And I in the very first page, I like the way that she has her family tree because for me, I want the visual where I can just trace it. And then what's also fascinating is remember, we've got all of us probably have four different directions because you got your mother's people, mothers, and then their people, and then your father's peoples. So it can go on and on. But I just think that it's important for all of us to try to, and I'm putting myself there too, to learn more about my history, my family history in these different eras of time. And the eras now, like we're all approaching 50 or are 50. So we're 70s, 80s, 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s. So we have now, we're a living record. So now it's looking at the 50s and the 40s. I'm noticing even a gap in um, literature, books that are set in the 90s, the 80s, 90s. I see a lot in the 50s and the 60s, or I'll see the 2000s, but I'm noticing that gap. And it's something that, as I think about like topics that I want to write about, I feel like, well, that's the lane. That's the lane. And it makes sense because those are my years. So I do want to see more of us treasuring and trying to figure out how to document our history more. And not just the famous people like Aaliyah Bundles mentioned, but everybody, all of our families. You also don't know because more and more these stories are coming out of people who did get the fame and fortune, but then they might not have been the only people during that time doing what was doing. They just got the platform. And don't we see that that still happens now? Okay, so moving on to this to the next book, whole different category, health. Calm your mind with food. Relieve your anxiety through food with this groundbreaking full body approach to mental health. That was part of the review. But the book is called Calm Your Mind with Food, A Revolutionary Guide to Controlling Your Anxiety by Dr. Uma Nato. Now, I did do a whole episode on this already, so I won't go into it. But this episode is all my 75 soft reads. So this was one of the books that I was reading during that period. I got so excited about the content that I did a whole episode on. I think it was around the holidays, and I wanted to share some books on health and wellness. So I thought this was a really good book. You learn about inflammation and how it affects anxiety and depression. And I was like, I really learned a lot about how there's a real strong connection between the gut and your nerves, and vice versa, like both the brain, the gut is so connected. So if there's things that you're eating or just experiencing that um, aren't keeping your gut in balance, your nerves and your anxiety is going to be out of whack. And why that's so important is we're in a society where we're running for treatment. There's a huge emphasis now on um, getting mental health as it should be. You know, people are seeking out these psychiatrists and therapists. However, the nutrition piece has to be coupled with it. So this physician, she's a Harvard psychiatrist, so she's has that medical degree. But even she, the more she practiced and studied and researched, she found out how important the nutrition is. And she said with her patients now, she starts there. So even before she treats with medication, if they're open to it, she starts with diet. And a lot of times that does help with the mood boosting changes. And I mean, a lot of this makes sense because we know that you've ever eaten something and just felt like crap afterwards, or you smell citrus and you just feel calmer. She goes well into the science in it. So I had mentioned it to my boss at work, and she ordered copies for her. Her daughter is a therapist. She ordered a copy for her. And I have a lot of the recipes. That's another thing that I like about it is chock full of different recipes that you can try. There's a broccoli one in there that looks really delicious. So I have a video I'd like to show that gets into the 6 pillars for a calming mind, which was one of the parts of the book.
You talk about the 6 pillars for a calming mind. I'm sure you've mentioned a few already on the podcast, but can you kind of walk through what those pillars might be?
Sure, I'd like to share some of them with you. And so we've circled around those points, but one of the principles I believe in is, eat the whole foods, right? Move towards eating whole foods as much as you can. It's not perfect, but the more times we eat the orange or the apple and really step away from the juices that are store-bought, have no fiber, and sometimes a ton of added sugar, a good direction to go. Another one we've talked about without listing it is avoiding those foods that we know drive anxiety. Most people think about those foods like French fries in terms of their waistline. They'll think, oh, if I overindulge in fries every day or fast foods every day, it's my waistline. No, it's actually your metabolic health, it's insulin resistance, it's driving your anxiety, it's setting up inflammation, right? So another pillar is stepping back, cutting back a little bit on those foods that are less healthy for us. And another pillar that I want to share is really adding in those kaleidoscope colors of the vegetables, produce, fruit in our environment that are giving you fiber, which is a necessary and important nutrient to actually nurture the gut microbes, feeding them. And as well as all the phytonutrients, the colors, carotenoids from carrots, anthocyanins from blueberries. These are just, super helpful, lycopene from tomatoes. All of these are just super helpful to feed our gut, but also just be nourishing ourselves. Setting up these pillars was it's intended to be what are the big six things I need to be thinking of if I'm struggling with anxiety. These are, and another one is we've covered this as well, magnify your micronutrients. And the reason is I want people to know what these bioactives are, and I want them to know where to get them from foods.
Yeah, so that video came from um oh, I don't have it up anymore. I thought I had it on my my page. It was producer. Do you know the name of the site? Okay. Can you go to the next? I think it's called Bio Wellness. But before we post it, I had it on my slide and it disappeared.
Yes, it is Be Your Wellness.
Okay, so Beeya Wellness, is that it? I don't know what happened.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. BEE like Bumblebee. Be Your Wellness.
Okay. So that's where you can go on YouTube to check out the whole interview with it. But that was a really good book. And like I said, I didn't see as many people doing the 75 Hard talk about this book. So I think more people should read it as part of the 75 Challenge. Moving on. Next up is, check this title out, Y'all Not Gonna Make Me Lose My Mind by Amelia Otto. And this was a really good book. I have to thank Lucky, a long time friend. He sent me a text like last year. It was around the holidays. I wasn't familiar with Emily. She is an artist, a hip hop artist, and she's also an author, as you can see. And so I sat and I watched her video, and I was like, okay. And she was talking about this book that she published, and she was also talking about a album. And so I'm all for supporting artists, and especially underground hip hop artists. So I bought the album and I bought the book. And I finally got around to reading it during the 75 Challenge. So the book is about, it's her biography so far, because she's still very young. And it's talking about a period of her life where she went through a lot of depression and ended up attempting suicide. And that's why it's called Notes from a Hip Hop Unicorn and Suicide Survivor. What she means by hip hop unicorn is that she's a super creative, and she provides some definitions of some of the assets, but also issues that super creatives go through. And I have a lot, I know what she means. Like, some of us may be multifaceted, or I think about, I have a lot of my kids, they all have very super creative in terms of, it's not just one thing, like she does everything from hip hop to theater, and that can be a lot of, you can get overstimulated. And then that combination of, like, at one point in her journey, she was going to college full time. She was working. She was part of this group, this it's called the Repertory Group, Artist Repertory in Harlem. And it's a award-winning group. They performed at the Oscars, and it was formed by this man who's like a former Black Panther. And it's been around for years, and it's still around. You can look it up. But they take youth and they train them in a bunch of different positive skills, from public speaking to artistry. A lot of it is performing arts. So she had to audition to be a part of this when she was a little girl, younger girl, and was ended up being in it for like 10 years and then ended up working for the theater company. And they traveled and they went into even prisons and schools doing their performances. So it was a really positive way to like keep youth off out of negative, out of the street and out of negative things that can take them down bad roads. But doing all of this caused her to have a mental breakdown, and she ended up unfortunately trying to harm herself, but she was able to survive. And in that surviving, she wrote this book. And it's a combination of her experience when she was in the hospital, when she was getting mental health, but also her musings on different philosophies that she has. So it's a unique kind of story. Like another thing is she played football. She was in one of the only females that was playing football for this football team in her neighborhood and what that was like. So she has a lot of unique perspectives on life. And I haven't seen anyone really, especially 75 hard people talking about this book. So I think this should get out there in the circulation too. It's a good one to spark conversation about mental health and well being, which is something we all are really needing at this time. She talks about suicide ideation and survivorhood and how to cultivate talent. And yeah, so I really appreciate the fact that she wrote this, and I think more people should check it out. And I have a clip here that I was looking for. It's not a lot out there because it's not many people, I don't think, that have read and done reviews on it. The only one that I found was in another language, but I did find this clip on the power of music, which is something that she's doing. So I wanted to play this, and then you can go to her page, like and subscribe to learn more about her. So can we play this clip?
One quick note: Roxanne Shante gave her a full interview about the
Oh,
book
yeah. Okay,
on
awesome.
Roxanne Shante's XM radio show. So you can
Okay.
go watch that video on YouTube. We were going to do an interview with her, and
Mm-hmm.
schedules just didn't permit, and that's one of the references she gave. So go check that out. It's a great
Okay.
interview. All right, here we go.
This is Amelia A. Ottal, aka Emily MC, author of Y'all Not Gonna Make Me Lose My Mind book, and today's topic is on the power of music. Now, before we get into some clips from the global community, we're looking at how influential music has been and could still be during one of the most unique times in human history, meaning today. The global pandemic of 2020 had a huge impact on mental health across all ages, races, genders, and classes, which opened up a lot of much needed conversations on wellness. Suicide rates went up. In the United States, it's the second leading cause of death in young people ages 10 to 14, and someone dies by suicide every 11 minutes. Now, with more people feeling the pressures of greed, corporate mergers, massive layoffs, unemployment, underemployment, and the rising cost of living, it's no surprise financial health is now recognized as a key pillar of mental health and also happens to be one of the leading causes of divorce. As well, the rapid growth of technology has many feeling left behind, out of touch, or increasingly not in alignment with the realities placed in front of them. In music, there's been a lot of talk about hip-hop being less mainstream and the feelings of, quote, rap fatigue, while we're also seeing the rise of country music and Afro beats more at center, ironically, or fittingly, with more hip-hop and R&B elements than ever. Seasoned, young, and new musicians in jazz, classical, metal, and ambient sounds have many seeking out live shows and digging in the digital crates, while soulful and underground hip-hop are full circling and putting vinyl records back in rotation. Meanwhile, so-called rap beefs, new genre blending, hip-hop icons in corporate decision-making positions, and very full, vibrant scenes of independent artists have also made the landscape full of hidden gems and ready for its next renaissance. But while who and what we can readily hear may keep changing or staying the same, the music industry can never fully take away the listening experience, the feelings, breakthroughs, motivations, and therapy of simply listening to the music and art that moves us. Today, we take a look at the power of music and its ability to literally and figuratively save our lives in a time we need it the most. It's been suggested that those
So
who
that's
don't believe
about,
artists deserve to be paid
I'll
for their
I'll
work.
stop there. And if you all are interested, you can go onto her page and watch the rest of her clip and order the book and learn more about her. I also think my daughter Deja, I think she would be interested because a couple of years ago she was doing a project that was about she wanted to put more out there about how music helps your mental health. And that's what that clip is talking about, how much music can be so uplifting and it could just be cathartic to make or to consume and to commune with. So I know it's a huge part of my well-being. I love it. I know you do too, babe. Our kids, everybody we know. So I just can't imagine life without it.
Don't want to.
No. So that was a really unique book. So check her out. So then the next book that I read as part of my challenge, and I'm going to do a whole episode on this, is Soil. 70, this is part of the um, challenge. So Soil, the Story of a Black Mother's Garden by Camille T. Dungy. And I actually got to meet her because this book, Rochester has a thing they do, Writers in Books in Rochester, New York is a writers book organization. And they do this thing called the City Reads. Every year they pick a book that they encourage the whole city to read. So this was the 2025 selection. And then they bring the author to Rochester for a lecture and so forth. And they always bring great authors. So I try to always attend that event. So I got to meet her, take pictures with her, and hear her talk about this particular book. So this is a really excellent book. You're getting a lot in one. It's a nature book, but it's also she does poetry, so there's poetry in it. You get a lot of information about ecology. Like she is so knowledgeable about everything from soil to gardening. You get a story about history and ecological justice. It's a story of motherhood, marriage, and Black history interwoven with the wild and nature. So all of that is wrapped up in one. So it's gotten a lot of great reviews, and people who are into nature love it. And even if you're not, it's really interesting. So basically, it's her. She's talking about she moves to Fort Collins, Colorado to take a job teaching, and her husband and daughter. And it's a very non-diverse neighborhood that she moves in. So she's concerned about that. And then she starts a prairie project where she's um, creating a healthy ecosystem. She wants to build this beautiful garden, but she wants the garden to be ecologically healthy, which is starting to become more of a concern as Americans are getting more knowledgeable about these things and not just wanting to plop a lawn space. They're understanding that there might be certain plants and, we're an ecosystem. We depend on one another as much as we don't want to admit that. So she gets into all of that. This quote that I put here: during racial segregation in the South, florists refused to sell flowers to Black people. In Soil, the story of a Black mother's garden, author Camille Dungy writes that instead they cut and sent flowers from their own gardens for weddings and funerals. Black people grew their own beauty and dug in and continued digging wherever and however digging was needed. And I think another thing that draws me to this is, in some ways, certain lifestyles are not associated with us. Things like being, like when the nature and the wild and even animal stewardship, like I just watched the Black Cowboy special that Jordan Peele put out. Usually in books, magazines, we're not presented in there as these are things that we were living as well. When if you think about it, how could we not? I mean, for many years, our people were toiling the land and they had to learn about all of this. Yet, when you see books and culture, it's just we're not represented. So this was educational for me because I grew up in an urban environment. I didn't really, but even in that environment, now that I think about it, I had it even around me, but it was just in a certain way. It was a different way. And then when I got way, way older and I moved back to Rochester and my grandmother migrated here, she grew a really beautiful garden. And my great grandmother, who lived in Long Island, had a garden. And my mother is very much into plants. And I'd like to eventually get into growing. I'm not there yet. So this was really so informative. And it's great. So I think this is another book that will be great to give as gifts. But it should be a 75 soft because it will open your mind. It will broaden your horizons to learning a lot. As she had gotten a sabbatical to complete a story the same year that COVID happened and ended up having to figure out how to write. And her daughter was home all day from school and she was homeschooling. And so that's why I said it's also a story of motherhood. And it's just written, you'll understand what I mean by it's hard to describe it being just one thing because all of this is wrapped into it. There's also photos of the things that she, the plants and stuff that she's growing with the backstory. So very intelligent, interesting woman, kind too. I really enjoyed meeting her. I have a clip here that I'd like to play.
All right, let's have a big hand for Camille Dungy and Abra Lee.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Jamie. Everybody can hear me okay? Okay, wonderful to see so many amazing, beautiful faces in the crowd. And Camille, what an honor and a joy to have you here today. And this is the first stop of your...
First official stop.
So,
yay, Philadelphia!
Congratulations. So before we get into your book, Soil, the story of a Black mother's garden, I wanted to reiterate something Jamie said. In Philadelphia being the first stop of this book tour and her acknowledging the OGCPV, the Our Garden Club of Philadelphia and vicinity. This is the oldest consecutive meeting of Black women's garden clubs in the United States, been meeting since 1939. And one of their founders, Harriet Wright Hines, did I get that right? From Philadelphia. But what's interesting, what you may not know, is that one of their former members was a Black woman named Bertha Rhodes, whose father started the Philadelphia Tribune, and she had a garden column in the
Wow.
1940s and 50s for Black women. And Philadelphia also being the home of garden writer Effie Lee Newsome, Lena Williams, the essay I showed you. So I feel like this is the best place for you to start.
Perfect. Perfect.
Your ancestors are in the building tonight. And speaking of place, I think that's a good place for me to start with this book. So you start the book in Fort Collins, Colorado, with your realtor, and you're in the car, and you're looking around, and you're talking about I think it's the plants that you see, and everything's so white. And I was also wondering, was it even the setting that you were in that time when you were looking around to see everything, and you were wondering if this was even a good decision to bring your family into this place?
Yes. So Colorado has blue skies most of the time, but it could also just snow, just anytime. July, sure. Why not? Bring on the snow. And in this particular garden tour, it was late May, and the cottonwoods were doing their thing, and a lot of the plants, the hawthorns and the ash and the pear trees were all finishing their blossoming. And so at that time of year, everything is just coated in these white petals that pile along the margins of the sidewalk and the curbs and on parked cars. And it really does look like there's snow everywhere. And I thought, what am I doing? Both on this practical level, am I going to have bad allergies here? Is it going to be really complicated? That much matter falling from trees gets caught up in gutters, right? It's like actually factually inconvenient, but also it was all very white. The town is very white, and we were moving from the Bay Area. My husband grew up in New York, in the Bronx and Queens, and I was about to bring him from Oakland, California, to a place that is just over 1% African American. What's that gonna look like for my family? Are we gonna find a place of welcome in this space? So from the very beginning, there was just a factual question about what was growing there, and a really practical question that I had to deal with.
And speaking of place, what I took from your book was
I
there's three main
think
places.
that was a really think about all of what she was saying and how relatable that is to many of us who end up accepting jobs. Like, say you are, in her instance, she teaches at a university, so you get your PhD, and you're a Black scholar, and maybe your partner is as well, and you get an opportunity to move somewhere to teach, and now you're maybe in a very non-diverse area, and you move there, and you're wondering if you're going to be accepted by your neighbors and how you're going to adjust to the environment. I know, like my aunt, when she moved to Georgia from New York, she loves it down there. But one thing, her allergies, because there's a lot of pollen down in that Atlanta area. So that's something that she talks a lot about. So it's so much to consider, the psychological health of your children if they're in these predominantly white spaces around people who may not be used to diverse populations. And that hasn't improved, that hasn't changed. So she talks about all of that, and then creating this garden. HOAs, she had a run-in with the HOA there because they it was like a heavy fine for something that she was growing a certain way. And then she had to educate them as to why she was growing it this way. And then it became a thing that they all changed. Like, she helped to change a policy there, because actually the HOA's rule was harmful for the environment. So that, and then that got me down a whole rabbit hole of HOAs and how they become such a stronghold in shaping the direction of American communities over community-based neighborhood environments. Because it's a pet peeve of mine, but I just think about language and how powerful it is. And you hear home owners association, and that's the lens by which a community is making their decisions versus maybe people or the needs of even the other environmental, the species that we're sharing the earth with besides just us. And that's a huge message of it too. Yes, we're on the earth and we're at the top, we're the apex of species, but we are still sharing the earth with other species, other, plants and animals and insects. So Silver from Twitter says, thinks we can control our health and income outcomes better if we learn to remaster the soil like years past. Yes. And there's a movement to change that, because just think about how much you spend on food and groceries. And if there was times where we were able to like grow more of our foods, and let's say we've talked about this, and when Camille came to Rochester, she mentioned it. Think about in any area you live in. I don't know where you live, Silva, but think about how much unused space, or maybe the better word is not just unused, but poorly used space that could be used for growing plants and food. And how there's so many benefits to that. Not even just for us to be able to eat it, but children, we could have hobbies. It could be a source of socializing. We could come together and learn from one another. It's getting you out, it's physical activity. There's all of this information about how, like, just putting your feet in the soil or your hands in the soil improves your immune system. So there's so much benefits to it. Now the soil has been stripped. Like I remember learning years ago from one of my health coaches about part of the reason why we have the health challenges we have is even when we do eat the fruits and the vegetables and certain foods, and people who consume animals, it's not, the animals are being fed poorly. So even if you do eat animals, they're not, unless you're eating grass fed animals. But I don't really want to promote that on this show anyway, because I have feelings about harming animals. But for people who are eating animals, the animals, what they're being fed on these farm factories is poor diets that's being transferred to you when you eat it. And then the soil has been so stripped because of all sorts of reasons that we're not getting the quality of food to allow us to absorb it better, which is part of what's contributing to the poor health that we have. So to answer your question, yes, if we can start learning more about nature, growing, all of us should grow something. And the question that I brought to her was that right around the time, the very week that I went to the talk, I read that Maxwell House is changing their name from Maxwell House to Maxwell Apartment, because there's a growing sense of knowledge that our generation and beyond may not be able to afford homes. There's not enough homes. The housing practices of the way that they've allowed Wall Street to come in and buy homes that the everyday person would normally buy. The point is, more people may not be living in single homes. So I wanted to ask her opinion about growing and being able to cultivate gardens and plants if we're in apartments. And she said that she doesn't think you have to have huge amounts of space to grow. A cool thing that I don't know if any of you saw Tracy, what's the comedian? His name is escaping me. I can't believe it. But um, what's his name? Tracy.
Tracy Morgan.
Tracy Morgan. Sorry. I don't know. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. But Tracy Morgan has a new sitcom out that we were watching. I think it's on Netflix. And I think they were intentional about this, and I really like it. It was based in Harlem, and he's in a brownstone, but at the top of it, they're growing stuff, and it's like a community garden, and it's an urban garden. And I love how they're showing that regardless of what environment we're in, if a lot of us were in urban areas, some of us have moved into suburban areas, there's some of us that are in rural communities, regardless, we can find areas we can grow. Like if you're in an apartment, you could be part of a co-op. We just got to get more imaginative of it. But it's not easy, and it's not to say that we shouldn't push back against all this, the monopolies that are causing us to have poor health. But we can take more of our destiny in our hands collectively, and that's a huge message of the book. So yes.
So we have another comment. It's on Daily Motion,
Okay.
which is another social media that we broadcast to.
Hmm.
Terry, I couldn't capture the comment, but Terry says, uh, with the amount of cell towers that are going up and Wi-Fi towers and the amount of air pollution that they create,
Hmm.
we should be planting 3 or 4 or 5 times more gardens, plants, just to counterbalance the air pollution that Wi-Fi creates from the towers.
Mm, okay. I, you know, so thank you for that commentary. I was reading Soil, and I was reading another book earlier this year last year that I discussed called The Service Berry. And you might remember if you want to check that episode out, but there's a slide that we showed that talked about how a majority of us know more about name brands than trees and nature. So our education and our priorities have been so pushed in a certain direction. A lot of it is consumerism. Nowadays, it's all consumerism. All day long, we're being sold stuff. And they have a lot of stealthy ways of doing it through television. I mean, have you even noticed now? I mean, the products are right there on the screen, and it's featured in the shows. It always has been featured in the shows, but they're being more obvious with it. It's a soap opera that I watch, and it's featured right there in the
Yeah,
show.
I know the crazy thing is they put the QR code for
Yeah.
a product
Yeah.
in the show while you're watching it,
Yeah.
so you can buy it right there on the spot.
Exactly. So it's become way more like buy all day. But
Out of
what we're
control.
not getting, and fine if we need goods and services to live lives of, so I'm not here to tell people not to get goods and services, but where's the messaging around, like what you just said, plant? we're not even getting hardly any of that information to counter or to supplement consumerism with sustainability. It's all consumerism. It's all material. And not planetary, earthly. Because if you're consuming the goods that are coming from the earth, if we're not giving back, we're not going to have anything to consume at a certain point.
Shout out to the Beechwood community of Rochester for planting new trees up and down the blocks of the Beechwood community just
Hmm.
this fall.
Yes.
That was really dope.
Yeah, that is really great. And the older that I've gotten, and I've been living in Beechwood for years now, and I go on walks on a daily, my appreciation to be in a neighborhood with trees, various types of trees, I feel rich. I feel like, because I know that there's a lot of new divisions and new neighborhoods in the country where it's a lot of like, these cookie cutter type of environments, but you don't see that character. And I've come to realize how much I love living in a area and in a city that has so many types of tree line blocks. I think it just adds. I know that for some areas where there's fires, and also you got to chop them down because they could cause home damage. So I'm not saying that we don't have those things to consider, but it's just beautiful. Also, I feel like it keeps our environment like healthier. So I agree with that. We do need to plant more, and we have to learn more about nature. That's what I've realized. Like, I think it's just ignorance, and it may be a willful ignorance because there's so much information. There's uh we used to have this, and you know we used to know it more, but like a lot of things, life changed, values changed, and certain things that we once embraced, we lost. And now it's like we want to get back to that. So let's all do that. Like, let's just start. I know for me that's an area. And I do have a friend, and I'm going to plug her show, Angel. She has been on here before. She has a show. She's a nurse practitioner out of Maryland, but she's also a master gardener. And she has a show on plants and gardening, but then she also is a clinician. So you're getting a lot of good stuff there because she has the clinical side, and she also is knowledgeable about plants and soil. So I'm learning more from her as well. And I think that's a great platform that just needs more people to pay attention to it. So that was a great book. And here's the thing: even though I spent a lot of time just now talking about it, I still do plan to have a ecological series, as I mentioned last week, because I just want to learn more about what's going on in our environment. It's a miseducation that is, I feel, deliberate, but at the same time, I will not participate in willful ignorance. There's places that you can go, and there's a lot of us in this space. Like when I just played that video, how interesting was it that Philly has these garden clubs going back since the 30s? Like when you think about Philly, do you think about that? I know I didn't before, but that's what's so cool. We're into so many things. All right. So moving on. Next up was, I think this is the last one that I'm showing, is this was a journal. So it wasn't a fiction, a nonfiction book, but it's, it counts. And I think the other reason why I wanted to feature this is I sometimes feel like journals don't get discussed as much. And it's almost like the ivory tower, because many people that go into academic environments, like they're researchers and scholars, they publish dissertations, and then they have to keep publishing, and that knowledge just gets, how can I describe it? The knowledge and the findings end up in an ivory tower somewhere, and it doesn't always get out there. And I know at U of R, where I was working for many years at the Center for Community Health and Prevention, they had a Center for Translation, which was supposed to help merge what's found in academia with community. So, but anyway, for me, this journal, I picked it up because I became just so, I had a desire to learn more about New Orleans and read fiction, nonfiction, books. And I came across, I was reading, this is what happened. I was reading a short story collection called New Orleans Noir. One of my favorite stories that was featured in it, I looked the author up. And when I looked him up, they referenced this journal. So I ordered this journal and I've been reading it. And they dedicated the entire issue to the 20-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, because that happened in 2005. So it had a lot of interesting articles in this. This journal is put out by, I believe it's University of North Carolina. I'm gonna also order, this was the fall issue called Katrina's America. And the winter issue is gonna be about like Black music, Southern music, and that one looks good too. So I'm gonna order that. But here you can see the table of contents, just some really interesting articles about different sides of what happened during the hurricane. There's a really interesting article about a man who he's like a environmentalist oceanographer, and they're studying the impact of hurricanes on the Gulf area. So that was a good one. So yeah, just a lot of good information. I felt like, wow, it's been 20 years and I didn't see a lot of I know that there was I believe Netflix did a special, but it felt like a forgotten time. It didn't feel like it got as much of a historical moment that was. I didn't feel like it got the you know what I mean, like the attention that it deserved. And that was the whole irony of what happened in Katrina. You know, days went by and those people were suffering. That was really hard to see for us that witnessed it. Imagine going through it. For a city that is such a cultural superpower for the world and for the United States. So I've been to New Orleans one time and I loved it. I do want to go back. I was hoping to go. There's a they do a book festival every year in March, and I was hoping to get down there this year for that. But even if I don't get down there for that, I'll get down there at some point. But I read two books in the last 2 weeks set in New Orleans. New Orleans Noir is a fiction book, and another book that I read was called A Kind of Freedom, and that was fiction too. This was the journal. So yeah, another thing is I literally have like so many of the my closest loved ones are in the South now. My mother lives in South Carolina, my daughter lives in Alabama, my aunts and cousins are in Georgia. So my grandmother and my aunt. My grandmother Butler lives in South Carolina. My aunts and cousins are in the North Carolina. So there's a lot of us in the South, and there's that. I have that Southern connection. So I want to continue to like read about the Southern experience, because we migrate back and forth, but there, that Southern experience, there's so much to it that doesn't get a lot of attention either. So I have, go ahead. I'm sorry. Were you going to say something, babe?
I can. Uh, as you were talking about Nola, baby, um, I hope those people down there get some recompense and some closure about their housing situation with that whole Brad Pitt debacle with the houses and how he was supposed to be creating sustainable, affordable homes for people after Katrina. And then
Yeah.
and it all went belly up because they were poorly built and poorly maintained, and it was just a mess of a movement. I hope those people get some sort of reciprocity, from that.
Yeah. You know what I'm unfortunately, it doesn't sound like they are. And because I was reading up on it, it sounds like a lot of people, the area, like there's a real underdeveloped area, and this is what the journal article was talking about too, that even though it's been 20 years, that area was never invested in, even to this day. There was a thought that people were going to go there and there was going to be all this gentrifying that was going to happen, and there was a fear of that. And even that didn't really happen because there's certain areas that people don't even want to invest in. So those wards, they also are having like population losses where people are just leaving. And then the people that are left are just making the best of it. But the homes, there was like 100 homes that make it right foundation built, and all but maybe four of them have crumbled and mold and all sorts of problems. But then the foundation folded, so now the people are just figuring it out. Some have left. A lot of them moved to Texas and dispersed throughout the South and you know the country. And I don't think that they're going to get anything out of it, unfortunately. It is a horrible situation, but it doesn't sound like the way that the foundation was able to insulate, and they have so many ways with legal means to be able to bob and weave through these things that I don't think those people are going to get any justice from that. So just so tragic all the way around. But one thing that I wanted to show was, I think it's the last clip. I came across this great clip on it's called New Orleans Beadmaster Pays Homage to Mardi Gras, because when I used to watch that show Treme, I learned about the Black Indian movement down there and how it became like a offs. I don't want to use the word subculture because I don't like sub. So I was looking for a language to describe the cultures that evolve out of a merging of cultures, if that makes sense. So, because there were Black people in Louisiana during slavery, and there were Indians or indigenous people that were helping Black people escape, and they mingled and they married, they wanted to pay homage to them. So, they started dancing and creating these masks, and it became a tradition. So, this group of people every year They mass, they develop these, they make them with their own hands, and that's part of the culture. The music, I started listening to it the last couple of days of my 75 when I was going out. I was listening to some of the music. One of them is by this chief. Oh, I can't remember his name, but he's one of the chief artists. So he's a musician as well. And it's just fascinating. So I want to show that clip and encourage you all to maybe check out this Southern Cultures Journal.
They call Damon Melanson the bead master of New Orleans.
I sew with the smallest beads. That's where you get the most detail.
But on Mardi Gras, he's also known as the Big Chief of the Young Seminole Hunters Black Masking Tribe.
I'm the Big Chief!
Long barred from official parades, African Americans created their own way to celebrate. Mardi Gras Indians wear massive, colorful suits to honor the Native Americans who helped Black people escaping slavery.
We're challenging each other.
And a challenge is?
The challenge is, I'm gonna sing against you, I'm gonna dance against you, and I'm gonna show you how I'm better than you in sewing.
Melanson started masking when he was just 14. When he became a big chief, an elder noticed the beadwork on his suit.
And he told me, he said, it's your turn, bro. Looking at my work, he was saying, man, you more than just a black masking Indian, you an artist.
His work has been shown all over the world. A solo exhibition is currently on display at Philadelphia's African American Museum. Dejay Duckett is the museum's curator.
You look at what Surratt was doing in the 19th century with oil paint, and now Damon is doing this with beadwork, which is, to me, is even more amazing and captivating.
His main goal was, just like mine, is to preserve this culture. And he takes us in places where I'd have never thought we'd be.
Once practiced in secret, black masking has gone mainstream in New Orleans. The Backstreet Cultural Museum, where Horace X is a tour guide, attracts visitors from across the globe.
It is a blessing to be able to tell our story.
And earlier this year, the NFL hired a black masker, Queen Taj, to design the Super Bowl logo.
So what I'm doing right now?
All that attention is just fine for Big Chief Damon Melanson. Come Mardi Gras Day, he says he'll still be right here.
You are making
I'm making
a
a
suit
right now to mask this coming year. Black masking in my life changed my life and made my life what it is today.
Yeah. So you see that art? I mean, that stuff is phenomenal. Isn't it, like the beading work? And then I was also wondering, I have so many questions, and I want to visit that museum when I go to New Orleans, because I'm wondering, like, during the hurricane, were they able to preserve the costumes? What do they do with the costumes when they're finished with it? Do they recycle it? Are they all in that museum? Where did the people live during that time? I just wonder about all of that. And then, babe, that logo that they made, was that for last year's Super Bowl, or is that this year's Super Bowl?
That had to be sometime in the past.
Okay. Because the clip was from it was 2025.
Yeah, that had to be sometime in the past, because I don't think the Super Bowl is in New Orleans this year.
Well, when was the Super Bowl in New Orleans? I'm looking up. Because was it recently?
Yeah, it's in California this year.
Oh, it was last year that it was in. Okay. I was just trying to that's why they did it, because it was last year, it was in the Caesars Superdome. I was just trying to figure out if it was come this year coming or if it was last
Yeah,
year.
yeah, it was. Yeah, that's why I said it was. It had to be some time in the past.
All
Yeah.
right. I couldn't remember if
Hey, all I need is a leather jacket with some of that beadwork. That's all. I'm good. Just give me a fly leather jacket with some of that custom beadwork. You know what I'm saying? I'm
yeah,
dripping
that's
crazy. I'm dripping
yeah,
out.
yeah.
That's fly. That's fly right there.
It is fly. It's like, yeah, it's really that's really something. So yeah, it's such a I'm just really like into their culture, and it's so cool. The music and the art. I'm also kind of surprised that there's not more books set in New Orleans. Because like whenever I was going down a rabbit hole over the last couple of weeks, it's not a lot of books set there. It's the same books. Like I went on like thread after thread, and they all talk about the same. It's about 10 books, but given how much has happened there, and the history and all the cultures and all of the historical events, you would think it would be a ton of stories in books. And they all reference Interview with the Vampire, which I've never read any of her work. Anne Rice, but she was a long time New Orleans writer. I think she eventually moved to California, but she made her impact in New Orleans. So they always reference her. They always reference there's a couple that I keep seeing referenced, but it's not like long tons of lists. There's a really good book by Jesmyn Ward called Salvage the Bones. And she's I'm going to do a whole Jesmyn Ward episode, but she's a very celebrated Black author. And she's out of Mississippi, but she did write a fiction story about Katrina, and it was set in Louisiana, like rural. But yeah, it's not a lot. It's not as much as I would think set there. So be really cool to get more writing. The New Orleans Noir was really good. It's a short story collection, and it was set. It's two parts, so it's before the levees broke. Is part one. It's about 12 stories, and then the second set is after Katrina, and it was some really good stories with that. So I enjoyed New Orleans Noir. So if you want to read or listen to a short story collection, they have the Audible version of it too. You can check that out. That wraps my 75 challenge books. So yep, 75. I was so happy to be done with that challenge. I was proud of myself for doing it and sticking it out. So if you are interested in reading any good books, you can't go wrong with any of those. It depends on what you're in the mood for. But thank you for joining me today. Next week starts Black History Month, and I've got some great things planned for Black History Month, some great books to share with you all. So have a great Saturday. Stay warm.